I attended my ex's wedding, and uncovered a crime that could destroy us both. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, pristine white, embossed with a silver crest, mocking him from the polished mahogany of his desk. It was for Olivia Maxwell's wedding. Olivia, his first love, his almost wife, now marrying someone else. Ethan Hayes, 32, a sharp, cynical investigative journalist, had stared at it for a long time, the paper feeling heavy with unspoken history. He had declined, of course. Attending felt like a self-inflicted wound. But then, a cryptic message arrived from David Miller, 35, a former colleague from his earliest reporting days and a mutual friend of Olivia's, urging him to come, hinting at something off. The journalist in Ethan, dormant under layers of personal hurt, stirred. The unsettling ceremony. The grand ballroom was awash in the soft glow of fairy lights, the scent of white roses cloying the air. Ethan, dressed in a borrowed suit that felt too tight, stood awkwardly by a pillar, a lone wolf in a flock of beaming faces. He watched Olivia, 31, walk down the aisle. She was radiant, breathtaking, her smile luminous, but something in her eyes seemed distant. Her fiancé, Richard Thorne, 45, a prominent real estate developer known for his ruthless business acumen, smiled broadly, a picture of affable power. He exuded charm, but Ethan, a man trained to see beyond facades, felt a prickle of unease. Richard's eyes, though smiling, seemed cold, almost calculating. David, spotting him across the room, gave a slight nod, his expression grim. He moved through the crowd, reaching Ethan, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a strained seriousness. He motioned towards a discreet corner. "Thanks for coming," David muttered, his voice low. "It's about Richard. I've been doing some digging." David explained his concerns. Richard's sudden wealth. The mysterious disappearance of his previous business partner, Arthur Jenkins, nearly 5 years ago. The rumors of aggressive takeovers and dubious dealings. David, now a private investigator, had been hired by Arthur's estranged sister, Eleanor Jenkins, 40, who had never believed her brother simply vanished. She suspected foul play, and Richard was her primary suspect. David's investigation had hit roadblocks, but a recent lead, a whispered detail from an old associate of Richard's, hinted at something being buried, literally, beneath one of Richard's early, major development sites. A site that was now the grand, newly built Thorne Tower. Ethan felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This wasn't just personal angst anymore, this was a story, a dark current beneath a glittering surface. He listened intently, his journalist's mind already piecing together fragments, searching for the crack in the polished facade. He looked across the room at Richard, raising a toast to Olivia, his smile unwavering. The unease intensified, a glimmer of suspicion. Later, during the reception, the air filled with music and laughter, Ethan watched Olivia closely. She seemed to be playing the part of the overjoyed bride perfectly, but there was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a slight tremor in her hand as she raised her glass. He remembered her vibrancy, her strong will. This controlled happiness felt forced. Could she know something? He caught her eye across the room. For a fleeting second, their gaze locked. Her smile faltered, just imperceptibly. A flicker of something, fear or sadness, crossed her face before she quickly looked away. It was enough. Ethan knew. Something was wrong. He maneuvered through the crowd, making his way towards Richard's inner circle. He recognized a few faces. Prominent city officials, wealthy investors, all basking in Richard's reflected glory. He saw Marcus Thorne, Richard's younger brother, 38, a man with a nervous energy, constantly checking his watch. Marcus worked closely with Richard, often handling the more delicate aspects of the business. Ethan subtly engaged a few guests in conversation, dropping casual questions about Richard, fishing for information. Most offered only praise, platitudes about his brilliance and generosity. But then he spoke to an older woman, Agnes, Richard's distant aunt, 70-something, who, after a few glasses of champagne, became more talkative. She spoke of Richard's rapid rise, his ruthlessness, and then, a wistful memory of Arthur Jenkins. "Such a shame," Agnes murmured. "He and Richard were thick as thieves, then suddenly, gone." Richard barely spoke of him after. She also mentioned a heated argument she'd once overheard between Richard and Arthur, about some land deal, something deep. Her eyes then drifted to Marcus. Marcus was there too, always tailing Richard. The pieces began to connect. A missing partner, a sudden fortune, whispers of buried secrets, and now, Agnes's cryptic remarks. The unseen clues. Ethan knew he needed access to Thorne Tower. David had managed to get him blueprints of the initial foundation work, which showed some irregularities, unusually deep excavations in a specific section, quickly filled. It was a long shot, but it was a lead. The after-party moved to a private club, loud and crowded. Ethan saw his opportunity. Richard was surrounded by well-wishers. Marcus, however, looked increasingly agitated, constantly checking his phone, then glancing nervously towards the exits. He seemed trapped, eager to escape. Ethan saw Olivia slip away to a quieter area, away from the pulsating music. He followed, maintaining a distance. She stood by a window, staring out at the city lights, her shoulders slumped, the facade of the happy bride momentarily dropped. He saw the loneliness in her stance. His heart ached for her, even amidst his growing suspicion. He approached her, slowly. She turned, startled, her eyes wide. "Ethan." Her voice was a fragile whisper. He offered a small, sincere smile. "You look beautiful, Olivia." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face. Surprise, perhaps a hint of relief, then immediate guardedness. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice regaining its composure. "David asked me to come," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. He saw a subtle flinch at David's name. He was worried. She said nothing, simply looked away, her gaze drifting back to the city lights. He felt the unspoken weight of her silence. He knew this wasn't the time or place to push. He simply stood beside her, a silent presence. The shared space, once easy and comforting between them, was now laced with unspoken tension. He noticed a small, almost imperceptible detail. On her wrist, beneath the elegant cuff of her wedding dress, was a faint, red mark, almost like a bruise. He remembered her tendency to fidget when stressed, to twist her rings or bracelets. But this looked different, more like a recent struggle. He returned to David, sharing his observations. Richard's cold eyes, Marcus's agitation, Agnes's hints, and now, the mark on Olivia's wrist. David nodded, his face grim. "Marcus is our weak link," he stated. "He's always been Richard's shadow, but he's not built for this kind of pressure." The digital trail. Ethan decided to focus on Marcus. He knew Marcus had a gambling problem, a weakness Richard likely exploited. A man desperate for money was often a man willing to compromise. He and David pooled their resources, leveraging old contacts, digging into Marcus's financial records. It was difficult, messy work, but they found it. A series of unusually large, untraceable deposits into Marcus's offshore accounts, coinciding with the period immediately after Arthur Jenkins's disappearance and Richard's sudden expansion. The money, David confirmed, originated from shell companies linked to Richard's development projects, specifically the Thorne Tower site. It wasn't direct evidence of murder, but it was a powerful indicator of illicit payments. Ethan then remembered another detail from Agnes, the aunt. She had mentioned that Arthur Jenkins, before he vanished, had been meticulously documenting everything, a habit he'd picked up from his early days as an investigative reporter before he went into real estate. He always kept a meticulous journal, she'd said. Feared Richard's ambition, even back then. A journal, if it existed, it could hold the key. Where would someone hide such a dangerous document? Not at home, that would be too obvious. Not in an office, easily discovered. But perhaps, at the very site of the crime. Thorne Tower, the place where David suspected Arthur was buried. It was a long shot, but Ethan's journalistic instincts screamed at him. If Arthur was meticulously documenting Richard's dealings, and if he suspected foul play, he might have left a failsafe, a hidden record. And likely buried within the very foundation of Thorne Tower, a grotesque secret enshrined beneath Richard's monument to power. And Marcus had been a witness, perhaps an accomplice, bought with offshore payments. He quickly photographed every page of the journal with his encrypted phone, then carefully replaced it, sealing the compartment. He couldn't remove the physical evidence, not yet. But he had the proof. He slipped out of the building as silently as he had entered, David waiting anxiously in a nearby alley. He showed David the photographs, his face grim. David's eyes widened, a look of profound shock and horror. "We have to go to the police," David whispered. "Not yet," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "Richard Thorne is too powerful. We need to expose this, not just report it. We need to hit him where it hurts." The media, the unforeseen complication. But then, a new, agonizing thought pierced through his journalistic resolve. Olivia, she had married Richard Thorne. If this information went public, it would destroy her life. Her husband, revealed as a murderer, a ruthless criminal. Her entire world, shattered. He remembered the subtle tension in her shoulders, the fear in her eyes at the wedding, the faint bruise on her wrist. Had Richard been coercing her? Was she a victim in all of this? Or was she complicit? The thought was unbearable. He and David spent the next few days in a frenetic haze, cross-referencing information, verifying every detail, building an airtight case. They prepared a comprehensive report, loaded with evidence, for a major national newspaper and a prominent news channel. The story would be a bombshell, a scandal that would rock the city, bringing down a powerful figure. But the image of Olivia, her radiant smile at the altar, now tainted by the knowledge of her husband's monstrous secret, haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was a pawn, trapped in a game she didn't fully understand. He knew he had to warn her, or at least understand her involvement. He couldn't simply unleash this truth without considering the collateral damage. He still loved her, in a way, a painful, complicated love that defied the years and the betrayal. He sent her a coded message, an old phrase only they would understand, to meet him at a discreet location, a small, out-of-the-way cafe they used to frequent in their college days. He waited, his heart pounding, half expecting her not to show. But she did. She walked in, her face pale, her eyes tired. The elegant wedding dress was replaced by simple, dark clothes. She looked fragile, vulnerable. He led her to a secluded table. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He laid out the evidence, calmly, methodically. Arthur's journal, the details of the murder, Marcus's involvement, the hidden burial in Thorne Tower. He showed her the photographs, the chilling entries. Her face drained of color with each revelation. Her hands trembled, her eyes widened in horror. She stared at the photographs, then back at him, her gaze filled with a profound, shattering realization. She knew, she had suspected, perhaps, but now the horrifying truth was undeniable. A desperate confession. Then, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper, broken by sobs. She confirmed his suspicions. Richard had been threatening her family, financially ruining her father's struggling business, if she didn't marry him. He had known about her previous relationship with Ethan, and had used that knowledge as leverage, subtly threatening to expose fabricated scandals that would ruin Ethan's career too. She had been trapped, forced into a marriage she didn't want, all to protect the people she loved, and to keep Ethan safe, even if it meant sacrificing herself. The bruise on her wrist. Richard's anger. He hadn't hit her, she clarified, but he had grabbed her arm fiercely during an argument about her reluctance to sign some prenuptial agreements. She confessed her suspicions about Arthur Jenkins. She had overheard hushed conversations, seen Richard's dark moods. She had even found a small, encrypted file on Richard's old computer, a file she couldn't open, but which she now realized was probably related to Arthur. She had tried to dig, to find answers, but Richard's control was absolute. She was a bird in a gilded cage. Liam felt a fresh wave of agony. She hadn't just been a willing participant in a cruel bet, she had been a victim, trapped and manipulated, sacrificing herself to protect others. The betrayal he had felt from her vanished, replaced by a profound empathy, a protective surge of the old love he still harbored. "I tried to tell you," she whispered, her voice raw. "That night at the bar, I saw you. I wanted to tell you about the bet, about everything. But I knew if I did, Richard would hurt you." He was watching. He understood now, her subtle attempts to warn him, her guardedness, her forced smiles. It wasn't indifference, it was desperation. The path forward. They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the truth settling between them. The city outside buzzed with indifferent life, unaware of the explosive secret they now shared. "What do we do?" she finally asked, her voice fragile. Ethan looked at her, at the woman he had loved, lost, and now found again, trapped in a nightmare. The journalist in him screamed to release the story, to expose Richard, to bring justice for Arthur. But the man in him, the man who still loved Olivia, knew the immediate impact this would have on her. "We expose him," Ethan said, his voice firm, unwavering. "But we do it carefully. We protect you." He explained his plan. Release the story, but with a focus on Richard's criminal activities, his ruthless manipulation, and Olivia as a trapped victim, providing an escape route for her. David would work with his police contacts, leveraging the media storm to force an immediate investigation into Arthur Jenkins' disappearance. It was a risky strategy, but it was their only chance for justice, and for Olivia's freedom. He watched her face, searching for hesitation, for fear. But instead, he saw a dawning resolve. The fragile woman was gone, replaced by a steely determination. She had been a victim, yes, but she was also a survivor. They walked out of the cafe, together, into the bustling streets of Mumbai. The city, usually a chaotic symphony, now felt like a battleground, a stage for the explosive truth they were about to unleash. Ethan no longer felt like a discarded lover, or a cynical journalist. He felt like a man fighting for justice, and for the woman he still loved, even if it meant destroying both their lives, or rebuilding them from the ashes. The quiet wedding had been a lie, but the revelation, the painful truth, was about to set them free, or consume them both. The story of Richard Thorne and Arthur Jenkins was about to break, and Olivia Maxwell, the reluctant bride, was about to become the unexpected key witness.